All right, so today what I want to discuss is muscle scraping or instrument assisted soft tissue manipulation. Now, you've probably heard of or done foam rolling, massage therapy, the Theragun type deals, things like that. What's different about IASTM is that you're using typically a stainless steel blade and you are putting the muscle under tension and scraping it. You're causing this tiny micro damage to the muscle in order to try and elicit specific results. Now, what is the promise that this muscle scraping or IASTM makes? A lot of people are going to actually disagree on this, as well as the mechanism behind why it does these things. But typically, people are going to talk about increasing healing time from injuries, recovering from workouts faster, or even applying order to the collagen matrix. Now, I can't really talk too much in depth about what is happening here from a mechanistic approach. Instead, I'd like to link you to a video from another professional who just does way better of a job than I could ever hope to here. So I have put the link to that video in the description below if you're looking for the mechanistic reasons of why we might not be able to look at scraping as a myofascial release. Now, even if we can't call it myofascial release, that doesn't mean that we can't get benefits from it. I don't want you to think that just because what you imagined was happening in muscle scraping isn't happening, and now all of a sudden all the benefits that you thought you felt, oh, well, none of it can be real now, because that's not the case, and that's not what I'm trying to do. Instead, what I'm trying to do is look at muscle scraping, IASTM, for what it is and what you can expect as the individual. A lot of the studies I'm going to reference here quote a lot of things that realistically I or you as the individual can't normally track. They're looking at muscle temperature, they're taking these deep scans of the bodies, they're just doing things that you can't track and you have to take their word for it. The whole point of this channel is to take research that's exciting or engaging and saying, all right, what quantitative measures can we do as a community together that we can see the differences in without having to rely on this fancy medical grade equipment. So that all being said, what I've chosen to assess today with my foray into muscle scraping is looking at range of motion. I'm strictly going to take baseline measurements of range of motion for different movements and then do the muscle scraping as similar protocol that's done in the studies. And then afterwards, I'll retest it. We'll be able to talk about the differences, and then we can talk about application. Is it worth it? What situations might it be worth it? Or is it more so a waste of your time? So now, looking into the specific literature, I did find the systematic review of IASTM from 2019. That's looking over some of the same parameters that I'm going to be looking at for my own N=1 study. Within this systematic review, I found 6 different studies that met the inclusion criteria for it and had uninjured participants, to which I am. Now, a different systematic review from 2016 that I found also had a section with IASTM for improving joint range of motion. And so I'll be referring back to some of these for results that I'm looking for in areas that I might be looking for them in. Now, all of the studies that I just referenced used IASTM for short periods of time. We're talking 40 to 120 seconds in them. What's cool about the second study that I just showed before is that they did a 2-minute comparison of IASTM compared to foam rolling. So different groups of people did either 2 minutes of IASTM or 2 minutes of foam rolling, and then they actually compared the differences between them. As I mentioned before, a lot of people have participated in foam rolling and continue to do so. And so cross application of looking at scraping versus that can give you a good idea of what results you might have yourself based off of this study. Now, in the study that did look at IASTM and foam rolling, both of those modalities did show an increase in range of motion. Once again, we're not talking about mechanism here, I'm just talking about quantitative results from it. I'm not arguing why it's happening or not happening, I'm just saying both of those modalities did show an improvement in range of motion over baseline. Okay, so with all of that being reviewed and said, here is my attempted protocol for an N=1 study on myself. I'm going to do some baseline flexibility tests. This will be done through a bent leg hamstring flexibility test, and then followed up by the classic toe reach that everyone's used to, where you're just reaching for your toes, reaching for the ground. So after I do all of these baselines, I'm going to do 2 minutes of muscle scraping on each of my hamstrings. I will then re-perform the hamstring mobility test right after. Following that, I will have my erectors scraped by another individual, and then I will retest the floor reach. Okay, and so here we're getting into the hamstring range of motion baseline tests. I chose the bent knee one just because it kind of isolates at the hamstring itself. It's more difficult to replicate, but at least we're not testing flexibility of other areas while we're doing this one right here. Moving on from that, we're doing the full reach to the toes, and as you can see here, there's just a ton of spinal flexion in there, which is why I didn't want to have that as the sole test of hamstrings. Jumping right into the muscle scraping. From the studies I looked at, none of them really identified a true protocol for how to go about the scraping. So I decided to go with these longer strokes along the belly of the muscle. I kept the muscle on a stretch, kind of in the same position that I did the initial testing on, and I had the scraper at about 45 degrees. We have the retest looking right here. Gonna be honest, not really seeing much of a difference with it. The muscle was definitely hot at this point and very, very warm, but with the bent leg, with the issues I talked about before, I couldn't really see a difference here between the side by side. We jump now into the spinal flexion scraping. I'm having my erector spinae scraped with it. Same kind of idea with the strokes and everything, just trying to cause that little bit of micro damage, warm up the muscle, whatever it is, we're getting that 2 minutes in on the erectors. All right, and here is the retest for the erectors. I'm going down. Now I know I don't hard lock out my knees. It's a soft lockout on the before and after. It is consistent before and after, but I am just acknowledging I don't lock out my knees hard. It's not very comfortable for me. And if we look at the close-up here, I'm going to end up freeze framing it as we get down, but there actually is pretty significant change on the toe reach test versus when we did the bent leg hamstring before. Now, there are a bunch of different studies that show things such as temperature change of the muscle scraped, like I kind of mentioned before earlier in the introduction. For our case, I decided to just every 15, 30, and 60 minutes record a short clip of what the scraped areas looked like, just so you can see the redness dissipate and kind of seeing the narrowing in on where the actual micro damage was done. Okay, and so as we finish off with looking at these final few clips of the redness and blood perfusion in the area of scraping, I want to take the chance to just start talking about application of this. Now, I'm one of the types of people that trains all throughout the day, and the last thing I want to do if it's 9 o'clock at night and I'm about to start winding down, getting ready for sleep, I don't want to have to do a full dynamic whole body warm-up just to warm up my muscles enough to get some nice stretching in before bed. I think scraping is a great opportunity for situations like this where I can acutely raise the temperature of the muscle and increase blood perfusion to the area without having to do a full dynamic workout that's going to elevate my heart rate and a bunch of other things that I probably don't want right before bed. So in a situation like that, I think it's great. Potentially another situation is if I'm doing a weighted stretch type movement such as a Romanian deadlift. Not only will getting an extra inch in the bottom of the Romanian deadlift get me more strength gains at that end range of motion, but it'll also help with hypertrophy by allowing me to go through a greater range of motion as well. Overall, I think scraping is a cool tool to have. If you have it, if you have access to it, try it out. See how it benefits you. See what scenarios it works better for you or not. If you haven't used it before, maybe you reach out, talk to a professional, schedule a session with them. I think it's a good tool. Thank you everybody for taking the time today to follow along with my process of looking at the literature and trying to apply it to myself. As a reminder, I'll be releasing new videos every Friday, so tune back in if you want to see what I'll be attempting next week.